It's nice to live out here on my own, but in some parts of Jersey it gets pretty cold in winter. I don't have natural gas where I live, so I have to depend on oil for heating. My oil tank is above ground. The heating oil is gravity fed through a thin tube from the tank to the furnace. When oil gets cold, it gets very thick, and in wintertime it doesn't flow as well. When it gets too cold and thick to run through the thin tube, the furnace gets starved for oil and it shuts off. I have a service contract with my fuel supplier, and they always come to my rescue eventually. But each hour that goes by, the temperature in the house drops and my stress level rises, worrying the pipes will freeze. Ordinarily, it's not a big deal on a work day, but in evening, weekends, and holidays, it's an emergency call. God forbid I live more rurally. So one day when it happened, I asked the technician if I could watch as he fixed the frozen fuel line. I'll go through it step by step what he showed me. The first step is to look at the thermostat and make sure that it's working properly. Make sure that the batteries are good. And we saw that that was okay. The thermostat read 59 even though I had it set for 76 degrees. So next, we start a fire in the fireplace to try to keep the temperature up in the house. Next step is to go out by the oil tank and see if there's oil in the tank and see if the gauge registers. It registers about 3/4 full. So it's not out of fuel. But that thin line underneath, even though I have it insulated, it does get very cold here, and it could easily freeze even though it has some insulation on it. So next I look at the burner that's attached to the furnace, and I see it has a blinking green light on it, and that is an indication of a problem. And it says on the sticker here that we have to recycle it, which means we have to press the red button. Now I have a Beckett burner, and with this particular burner, after pressing the red button, we have to wait a few seconds for the flame to ignite, and then we'll wait a little bit longer to see if it stays lit or whether it goes back to failure mode and starts blinking again. I'm not sure if you could hear the oil pump whining like that because it really doesn't have enough oil in it to run smoothly or keep the burner lit. Yeah, it failed again. So I'll take a walk out to the work van and get the compressor, and just hook up the hose first, and then I'll snap on the air nozzle that I'm going to use to blow out the fuel line. Now, take note here, this warning label: electric shock hazard, can cause injury or death. Disconnect power before servicing. So I have to mind that warning. And the next thing I'll do is I'll shut off the emergency power switch. Make sure there's no juice running through. Then I'm going to take my adjustable wrenches and fit them over these two nuts here to loosen the valve from the black pipe. First I'll get a bucket under there to catch any oil that spits out. And I want to put my adjustable wrench over the brass fitting on the left there next to the black pipe and hold it steady while I turn the brass nut with the other wrench on the right. And I loosen that nut. I could do it by hand the rest of the way. And then once it's loose, I can detach the two fittings and pull them apart and see if any oil comes out of the line into the bucket. And we could see there's nothing coming out there. It's pretty clogged up. So the next step I'm going to have to do is get the compressor, and we're going to put the nozzle in the tube, and we're going to give it a squirt to see if we can push some air through the line to force the frozen oil out of the line back into the tank and just mix around with all of the unfrozen oil, and hopefully we'll get some good oil to drain back into the line so that we can start the furnace back up again. And you can see after a few moments after I take the nozzle out of the tube that oil starts to flow. And I try to turn the valve off, but for some reason it's not turning off, so it's going to keep on flowing, so I have to get this connected back together real quick. So let me do that real quick. This is just one of many catastrophes that can happen if you try to do this by yourself, so only in an emergency, if you know what you're doing. So now we have the two fittings connected, and I'm going to tighten it up with a wrench and make sure everything is squared away and not leaking. Now I take a good look at the valve handle to see which direction to turn it to make sure that the valve is open so that oil can flow. And I turn it in that direction to fully open the valve and let the oil flow through to the burner. The next step is to clean up and clean all the oil off the fittings with a rag and clean my hands and move the bucket full of oil away from the furnace before starting it to a safe place. Then we go over to the emergency switch again and we turn it on, we put it up position. And then we come down and we take another look at the burner and we see that the green light is blinking. It needs to be reset again. So just to press the red button for a few seconds and then release, and then in a second or two the furnace will fire up again and hopefully it will stay lit. We'll see when the green light comes on, and if it stays on then everything is working properly. So the next step I'm going to do is recycle the fuel oil that I blew out of the lines, and I'm going to take a clean container and I'll take an old toilet paper roll and I'll cut it in half and use a coffee filter, and I'm going to place the toilet paper roll in the bottom of the container, and then on top of that I'm going to put the coffee filter, and then I'm going to strain the content from the big bucket into the coffee filter so that it filters through into the small container. And I have some clean fuel oil again, so I can put that back in my oil tank. Now I have to be sure to take my oil-soaked coffee filter and toilet paper roll and the container and keep that outside the house, not inside the house. It is flammable, so I have to be careful to dispose of that properly. Next we're going to go out to the oil tank and take the cap off, and we're going to pour the cleaned fuel oil back into the tank, and we are not going to spill a drop. And after that's all done, then I'm going to put the cap back on and screw it on tight, and then we're all finished. And we can go back in the house and check the temperature on the thermostat and make sure that it is getting higher, and it is, so everything seems to be okay. We're back in business. So just keep in mind, this is something that I only do in case of an emergency, or if I really don't feel like bothering the service company 10 times in 1 month. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you learned something, and if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe if you want to. Thank you.